Everybody listen to We're Not Wizards, because we are the best, and we're not wizards, no matter what anybody says. Goodbye.
Welcome to another episode of We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I'll be your host for June. Sunny June, overcast, dull, hot, humid. It's potentially been snowing. I think we've had fog at one time. It just can continually changes, as these things kind of do. Now, there's two things you can do. You can set yourself kind of goals and challenges in life, and you can set yourself kind of things that you would like to achieve. One of the things I decided to set myself is a possibility that I could maybe have Dávid Turczi back on the show again, because he's a delight. And the second thing is there a possibility that I could control Dávid Turczi if he ever came back on the show. And so I decided, if you're going to be doing something like that, you need to bring on somebody that's going to back you up, somebody that's potentially going to help you, somebody that's going to maybe help David to buckle down a bit. So with that in mind, I'm delighted to be joined by the co-creator, co-designer of the Imperium Classic and Imperium Legends games, which are currently being much lauded and published by Osprey Games. I have got Dávid Turczi and I have got Nigel Buckle. So good evening to you both.
Good evening to you and all the listeners.
Is David still muted himself?
Yes. I'll say good evening after I decided that I have stayed silent long enough for you not to make a joke about it.
Brilliant.
Oh dear. Okay, so first of all, David, are you well? Yes or no is fine.
Yeah, I deserve that.
Yes, you do. But are you well?
That's fine. It's entirely... I am delaying my dinner over entertaining you, so make the most of it, please.
If you want, you can go. I'm not going to say...
it's fine.
No, you can stay. No, we've got stuff to talk about.
I like chatting with Nigel.
I'm fine. How are you?
That's nice. I'm good. I'm delighted to kind of have you on, because what the general kind of premise of the show, and I never ever assume that anybody listens to any of the episodes that we put out here, is to find a little bit more out about the kind of the designers and developers behind the games. So when I was speaking to Benji at Osprey, he offered me the opportunity to chat to you both about kind of the Imperium games, which seem to be, they're being very, very well received at the moment. There's videos left, right, and centre. People are doing kind of playthroughs and unboxings, and they're taking photographs and everything like that. And I thought it'd be interesting to hear a bit more about yourself, Nigel, and how you got into the kind of the design side of things, and what it's like kind of working with one of the hardest working people or the most prolific designers in developers in the industry at the moment, which is David. I know I give you a lot of nonsense, David, and some of it's deserved and some of it's undeserved, but I'm wondering if you're actually just a Terminator because you just never seem to be stopping at all.
I just don't think he sleeps.
Isn't that right? I don't think he sleeps
I
either.
do, but I design games while I sleep, so it actually quite works. There is no...
Are you like a dolphin? Is that you have half of your brain kind of like asleep, you rest half your brain and the rest of the other side of your brain's kind of designing away?
I don't know.
And then
I mean, I've definitely been doing the designing in my sleep part a little bit too much recently, but as long as I just knock myself out and sleep through a day once every month or so, then it seems to be keeping me alive. So ain't complaining.
Let's start. I mean, we'll talk obviously about stuff that you've been up to very soon, Dave, because it is, as we said, very, very prolific. In terms of yourself, Nigel, you've kind of really come into the forefront kind of quite recently. I mean, in terms of kind of like back catalogue, have you had a lot of designs done? I mean, have you got a few kind of games, kind of titles out there that maybe people have heard of that you'd like to
I've
kind of remind us of?
I've got titles out there that you won't have ever heard of, probably. I've been operating in stealth mode, I think, under everybody's radar.
Right. Okay. Are you
if Nigel is going to be this polite the whole thing, then I will have to keep interrupting. Like, I'm trying to be nice, but Nigel is out-nicing me, and that ain't going to work.
I just like that. I like the fact. See, I think it's going to be like you get these people that kind of go, well, I was into Nigel Buckle back when he was doing the Celtic game kind of thing. You get these folk that are kind of like, they've been liking bands back when they were doing their garage tapes. So there's probably board gamers out there that are going, oh, Nigel, yeah, I've heard of him for years. Have you not looked at the other stuff that he's done? But have you been kind of like quietly slinking along like a designer shark, kind of waiting to strike, and then all of a sudden?
It's more, I tend to spend quite a bit of time with a game usually, and the other side of it is, as anybody who would, I'm going to design a game. Having the idea is the easy bit, and then making the game is a challenge, and then getting it to actually be published is a whole different matter. And some of it is, it's like a lot of things in life. Once you're well known, it's easy, but when no one knows you, it's like, who are you? And getting your design in front of people and getting a publisher to actually take notice and risk, because it's a risk, is obviously a bit of a challenge, really. So it's taken me a while.
What kind of games would you say kind of influenced you? What games do you not games that necessarily got you into the hobby, because that's the same old story and everybody asks that question, but what would you say kind of games that influenced you enough for you to say, you know what, I can get some white paper and some post-it notes and some pens and start making stuff?
I've been playing games for almost as long as I can remember, and back in the day, there wasn't the vast choice you've got now. So, and also, when you're a teenager or whatever, you haven't got acres of disposable income. So, and there's not the internet to say, is this any good? So you might buy a game and then discover it doesn't really suit you, or the rules are rubbish or whatever, and you'd house rule it. So an awful lot of my early playing of games, we have what we called house rules, where we change it to what suited us. So me designing games was just an extension of that, really. So originally it's taking someone else's idea and changing it to suit me. And then I got to the point where, well, how about going one step further and starting from scratch? Although, of course, you never start from scratch, because you're inspired by, or you've seen something in another game. You think, oh, yeah, I quite like that, but that's not quite how I'd do it. And, going from there, really. And, of course, when you design games, you come up with what you think's a great idea. And then when you actually get some scraps of paper and bits of cardboard or whatever and put it down in front of someone else, you realise that, how I thought that was going to work isn't. No, it's not that great, really. Perhaps not. So I've found lots of different ways not to make a game. Put it that way, shall we say? Has it been? Do you think it's easier to get stuff out there now with
like the kind of the emphasis on social media and everybody on kind of like Board Game Geek and stuff like that it's easier to kind of get noticed by certain people? Or is it still as difficult, and is it still, it can be down to kind of being in the right place at the right time for a lot of things?
I think there is quite a lot of being in the right place at the right time, but I think if you've got passion and vision and determination and a little bit of capital, you can always just go do it yourself. There are people that kickstart a game with and make 50 copies. Okay, they're not gonna make a big fortune. They're not gonna make a small fortune. They might not make any money at all, but they've had the pleasure and the enjoyment, or the stress, or everything of making something, creating something, and people have bought it. So I think yes, now the opportunity's there for people. I think Kickstarter has changed quite a bit. And now quite a lot of the big companies use it as a pre-order system. And I think that probably hurts some of the little people who want to just, do a small print run of 50 copies or whatever. People just go, move on. There's not 400 minis in this one. So I think maybe the golden age of that has passed. I don't know. But there's still competitions on Board Game Geek, where you kind of like, can you make a game out of a postcard, or, one page of rules, the roll and write stuff. If you want to design a game around that, all you need is a pad of paper and a die. So I think there is. Or
I was going to say, or if you're David, like a normal sized board game.
Yes.
Basically, because I've seen his roll and writes. Yeah. I've played his roll and write game.
And 25 custom dice. Yeah.
Oh, there was only 9 in it. Come on, you guys are picking on me now. There's only
just like we brought David on to put him on blast.
9 custom dice of 3 molds in the Roman roll, and it was a perfectly nice medium heavyweight economic hero game. If you want to talk about crazy roll and write, ask me about Vengeance Roll and Fight, because that was crazy, but it's a different kind of crazy because it's real time. I dare you to try and do that.
I'm not here. I mean, you will get a chance to speak, and I'm sorry, but it's kind of like, it's just like a little dig.
I don't
here.
You know everything I have to say already.
I don't. You continually surprise me. It's like having an excited kitten that's found the catnip, really, and the meeples at the end of the day. What I have to ask you, the question I do have to ask you, Nigel, is Celtic Quest.
Yes.
The first game that you did, 2005. And then after that, you've got Omega Centauri at 2014. Okay? Yep. And then you've got obviously Imperium, which comes along kind of like another kind of 6-7 years later. Are you going to start doing things quicker?
Well,
because you're only on the planet for a
absolutely. I mean, the thing is, Omega Centauri would have come out a lot quicker, but the original publisher, that all went a bit south, and then Spiral Galaxy rescued it, but obviously then it took, a little bit of time, and they wanted to make some little changes and whatever before that came out. And then Imperium, as we know, would have gone with a different publisher, and that had a little stumble as well. So I think, not going to say unlucky, but yeah, there's been a few speed bumps in the way, shall we say? Yeah.
When you were first coming up with kind of like Imperium, was there any part of you, because you work on something, you work on a game, like I'll write an article or I'll do a video or I'll, and I'll go, oh, that actually, I think that works kind of thing. With Imperium, when you were kind of going through it and playing it and play testing it, were you kind of going, actually, this is really working for me at the moment?
Well, so
did you have any?
Yeah, so the way Imperium started was, I played Dominion and was like, oh my God, what an amazing idea. Because I played collectible card games where you built a deck and then brought it along and played it.
Yeah.
But Dominion was like, build your deck as you play. Oh my God, that is amazing. And all over London, everybody was playing it everywhere. But I didn't actually like it that much. it was a little bit too dry for me. I didn't really like the kind of take a long time setting all your piles up and then looking at the thing and working out with your engineers, and then that didn't really grab me that much. So I thought, well, can I do something like that? So I went away and did my own deck builder and played it with the group I play with. We quite liked it, and that we did that for probably about a year. And then I thought, oh no, we'll take it to somebody else, see what they think. And I did, and it was a disaster. Because the problem was we had the drafting, and it got to the point where you need to know how to play the game to know how to do the draft, but you need to do the draft to play the game. So just anybody coming in could never start. So it was a disaster. So we kind of I threw nearly all that away and gave up. And then a little bit later, we played Core World, I think it was, and some other ones that kind of got me back into deck building. And then I went back and revisited what I had as a drafting game. And rather than draft, I built a tableau, which is what you kind of do with Core Worlds. So it became a tableau building with the civilization theme. And that worked a lot better. And played that around some of my local games clubs. People were quite interested in it. It did quite well. I pitched it to a few publishers, and they like lots of cards. Didn't really go anywhere, but I got some feedback about improving things. So again, carried on working on it, and then eventually pitched it to what was NSKN, and they loved it. And they went, great, we'd do this, but our publishing, we're kind of booked up because, that's how publishers work. So it was a little while before they could get to publish it. But they had a list of things they wanted changed. And I mean, it started off with 6 Civilization, I think I had it, and they wanted more than that and some other bits and pieces. So I had things to do while I was waiting. And then that's when David got kind of pulled into the project as well, because they asked him to come and help with the developing.
I quit dibs on Nigel.
Did you, with the number of games that you've been involved in, David, when you started getting eyes on Imperium, were you kind of like, oh, I like, this is clinking away in my nice little head. I like what I'm seeing here, and here's the things I would change.
Yes and no, and let me just tell the whole story, and then I'll do it quickly.
Let's do it. This is your time to talk.
I know. Thank you. So so I knew Nigel before Imperium because he was the other board game designer in the board game club I was frequenting at the time. And when my first game came out in 2013, then I was like, everybody look at me. I have a game, that kind of person. Luckily, I got worse since. And one summer many years ago, Nigel and I traded copies. I gave him my first game, which is not terrible, but I wouldn't publish it today in the form it was then. And he handed me Omega Centauri. And he warned me that the player aid is terrible. He warned me that the rulebook is terrible, and God, they are. But I think Nigel, you might have even taught the game to me at the time. I don't remember. And then I took it back to my own friends group, and we played it like 3 or 4 or 5 times. And this was on the tail end of the popularity of the first edition of Eclipse.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoyed the concept of Eclipse. And the more I played, the more and more I realized that I just enjoy having fun with it, but I don't enjoy the actual things happening at me in the game. And Omega Centauri lit this light. It's like, holy hell. And then I asked Nigel, hey, why is nobody knowing about this game? Why is the play rate crappy? Etc. etc. And he told me all the tragic backstories of why games take 7 years for him. And I was like, all right, let's keep it in mind. Maybe in the future we can work together. And when in 2018-ish, I started working as initially a part-time and then a full-time game developer. One of the publishers I was working for was an SKM.
Yeah.
And because they published Dice Settlers, and I helped them both develop and do the solo mode for Teotihuacan, which is now a BGG top whatever super highly rated thing. So they were like, cool, let's keep doing this.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, what projects do you have in mind? And they put 2 or 3 games on the table, and I saw Nigel's name on one of them. And I was like, I don't care, I want that one. Because this is the guy that made me like Space 4X again. Let's see what he does. Oh, it's a boring deck builder. I hate those. So that was my predisposition when I sat down to play Imperium is, oh God, another deck builder. There hasn't been a good one since Mage Knight.
Oh, come on. Well, I suppose so. See, I'm like that, but
Yes.
then again, I'm like, oh, I hate deck builders, and then I have a love-hate relationship with like Star Realms. And I'll play Star Realms, and then I'll get right
is a
into it.
perfectly fun app. It's something
Yes.
I want to play against fun friends of mine while we're waiting for the burgers to flip. It's not a game I sit down to play games. So for me, deck building was Mage Knight and what I hoped Few Acres of Snow would be, but it obviously isn't.
Yeah.
And Core Worlds. Core Worlds was like the one exception of deck builders that like kind of worked for me. And then I sat down to play Imperium. And I didn't know at the time that Core Worlds was Nigel's main inspiration, but because it felt like in the direction I wanted to be. The natural arc of the nation deck and the civilizations that makes the game cool is great. Explaining asymmetric civilizations to people is great. But I'm always the kind of person that wants strategy and not random messing around, but I don't want to be bored on my opponent's turn. Because then I zoom out and I don't play it. So when I played the game, originally my job just was to figure out how to make a solo mode for it. And it's like, deck builders, why do you need solo? You just sit there and be bored for an hour by yourself. So I played the game and I asked myself, how could you dial that up to make me want to play it, even if I'm not sitting there having some fun person across the table talk to me. And from day one, that's what I've been doing to Nigel is, I love what you're doing, but could you make it better into that direction? And I love working with Nigel because he says, no, wait, actually, yes, and then it's perfect. And then when he thinks that he's off the hook, then I ask a question just like that again. And every time I ask a question like that, he makes the game somehow better. And we did that. The game got a lot... Like, my biggest insistence was that the market should be non-random and meaningful which cards you want to buy. And that's... You can see it in the setup of the game now, that it's not a river that gets refilled. And in the way you add a token at the end of the round and other people can't exile that card, but they might want to buy it now because you made it better. So that creates this whole, you don't want to put a token on a good card that your opponent already wants to buy, but you don't want to put it on, but you don't want to not put it on the card that you want to buy either, because if you don't, then it gets exiled. But what if you... So that means that the decision of which card to put your token on sometimes matters, sometimes not. But when it does, the only way to make the decision reasonably is to pay attention to your opponent. And as like, asymmetry is cool, but can we make it more asymmetric and more and the coordinations got a little bit more asymmetric, and then as Nigel will tell the story afterwards, we went nuts. But everything was about, to me, because the mechanisms are smart, but the system of, hey, you buy better cards and shuffle your deck isn't interesting to me. Therefore, I was asking everything else to be super interesting. And Nigel obliged me. And now we have a game that the deck builder fans like, and the I don't like deck builders because I just have to buy the better card people can also like.
They like that as well.
That's all I can ask for.
In terms of, and this is for Nigel, because I've met David. He's been on the podcast a couple of times. He's a confident, strong kind of personality. So when it came to working together with him in the development and the design side of things of Imperium, did you have to be quite kind of aware of still pushing the original kind of vision of Imperium and learning how to kind of like push back, or were you quite stubborn and say, right, I see where you're going with this, but this has got to remain in the game, otherwise it kind of goes against what I was trying to achieve as a game. Kind of
so
basically.
I mean, for me, all the cards have to make sense thematically. So if you look at any card in Imperium, okay, you might have to squint a tiny little bit, but all the cards, there's a thematic, you can see the theme behind it. And I didn't want to just create a card because the game needed it and then, oh yeah, we just paste something on, it'll be fine. So there was a reason behind them all. So if we needed something altered, it'd be like, well, then it can't be called that, it's going to have to be something else. So that was the first side of it. The other thing what I'd say about David, yes, he's got opinions. He's quite, forceful in his opinions, but he's not one of these people that I'm right, I'm not listening to anybody else. If you can come back with, yeah, but what about this? Or have you thought about that? Once you've convinced him that actually what you were thinking actually is valid and correct, he'll quite happily drop what he was arguing for 20 minutes ago and then vehemently argue that what you're now saying is the way it should go. So it just, I just had to make sure that, I wasn't bullshitting really.
Yeah, no, I get the impression. And no, as I say, from my interactions with David, he's very passionate about what he does. That, very, very passionate about what he does. I think at the end of the day, I'm probably correct in saying that David just wants to make a really, really good game.
Exactly. And he's not.
And that's the core.
And he's not so egotistical that my idea's got to be in it come what may. Often he'll say, there's something up here. This wheel's a little bit wonky. Here's my idea to straighten it. And I'll go, yeah, okay. And then I'm the sort of person that kind of has to cogitate on things. Often David and I have a joke that I have to go sleep. I have to go and sleep on it. And then I'll come back after I thought about it a bit with, yeah, okay, this wheel's wonky. This is how we want to straighten it. And it wasn't David's original suggestion, or it might be part of his original suggestion, but I've done something slightly different on top. So I think we work quite well together, I think. We're both respectful of each other, I think.
Do you sometimes find you've got the ability to slow him down a bit? No. Because you're like saying, right, this is brilliant, but I'm going to take a break and go off and think about it. And he's kind of left there going, but.
No, because he'll find something else to jump and flag at the same time. I quite often have to say to him, we're not changing two things at once, because then we won't know. If it doesn't work, we won't know which thing or whether it's the interaction that's caused it. So he's quite keen to, we'll have a list. And sometimes I have to. But fortunately, because David's working on 101 projects, he can just, okay, I'll go look at something else and leave me working on it, and then we'll come back to it. So, it works really well, I think.
I'm raising my hand here.
That's why the video is off. Go ahead.
So, first of all, everything he said is true. It's exactly the fact that we are challenging each other, because when it sounds like I am changing 7 things at the same time, the way I feel is that I am doing a systematic fix, not tweaking this card, tweaking that card, tweaking that card. I'm applying it. But if I do that a lot, I do get carried away, and sometimes I am changing 7 things along with it. Whereas if you're being too cautious and let me just change this one number and try again, then it might not ever in human lifetimes get to the part where it's really bloody good. But by both of us respectfully and decisively explaining this to the other, we both let the other one do their way if we feel that they can't be that wrong. So basically, we shut down each other's mistakes. Nigel shuts me down when I'm being too fast, and I shut him down when he doesn't look far enough. And because of that, the game is just this, and some other you might find out later about, is just rapidly improving without swinging to one side or another, because he keeps me on swinging and I make sure that we push ahead. And that to me is the most fun way of making games.
Yeah, we definitely we complement each other, so we're not both doing the same thing at all.
Yeah, I think sometimes you need that. If you've got two people that are sitting there agreeing with each other all the time, then sometimes you've got a tendency to miss out something which somebody will come along and go, well, that bit doesn't work. And you've been so busy kind of nodding dog at each other that you don't want to kind of challenge somebody on it. So it sounds that things kind of work really, really well together.
And also the other thing is our tastes in games. Okay, there's some overlap, but David's definitely much more on the Euro side of the fence, and whereas I'm quite happy to play a game like Eldritch Horror or Arkham Horror, where you can just not roll a 6 and just it's a disaster, but the game tells a story. You can remember those situations where I just could not pick up that gun or whatever it was and it creates a memory. So I like those sort of games, and David might say they're not games, they're experiences, but whatever.
Is that what you try to do with Imperium?
Yeah, I like to think. I mean, you can look back at the end of the game and look in your nation's history, and it's like you've written the history of that nation. If you don't want to play it that way, you can go into it just as I'm going to collect the most victory points, or I'm going to try this strategy and do that. But if you're the sort of person that wants to say I'm going to be Rome and see if you can do that as well. You can go get your bread and circuses, and you can see how far you can expand your empire, or are you going to develop more things than anybody else, or whatever. So those opportunities exist if that's the kind of thing you like to do as well.
So for people who
hands up,
he's back. No, I saw that. I just didn't know.
Oh, my camera is on, huh?
No, carry on. I can edit it out.
Yes, but conversely, my experience and approach evolves, and working with Nigel, like no, I still don't want to play the roll a 6 to survive the encounter type of Ameritrash co-op games, even though I now understand how people can have fun with it. But I have witnessed it firsthand that heavy games that I loved and I enjoyed, and people were staring at me with blank expressions in their eyes of like, I don't understand what this game is about. Once they been adapted to tell a story, once they made more sense, people liked it more. And then once we had a story, then that inspired me to come up with new mechanisms for that game, and that made the game better. So like Nigel's point of view came along for my career just at the right time, because I just about to became receptive to it. And in fact, today I want to design not setting but narrative of my who am I, how am I trying to win, what do I care about, even if it's a Excel spreadsheet simulator. If there is no who am I, then I'm not having fun with it, because I don't like playing Excel sheet simulators. I like games that are as smart as Excel sheet simulators, but they don't feel like that. And therefore, it didn't take me a lot of convincing to approach it from the theme. And then once Nigel presented it and once showed me examples of, look, this one doesn't tell the story, this one does, then I was able to say, oh, then we can tell that story with this mechanism. And he said, I get you, but it's too complicated. Let's try it this way. And again, it's just continuously improving each other.
For people who they probably have heard of Imperium, because it is, it seems to be getting a lot of coverage at the moment. But what would you say for people who are looking at the game? Would you be kind of like your 2-minute kind of elevator pitch, Nigel? How would you describe it to people who are looking at the box or looking at it online for the first time?
I mean, it's going to depend what sort of game they like, really. But I'd pitch Imperium as a game with a narrative arc. So you start as a barbarian and empire mostly, and through the course of the game, you become an empire. And I believe that for a deck builder, there's an awful lot of theme in the game, because rather than it being, you have a starting hand of one card that's different from everybody else, and then you've got free choice of where you go. Instead, with Imperium, you've got a personal market, which is your nation deck. So it's just the order of those is randomized. And then once you get through that and you become an empire, then you've got all your developments, and it's up to you, which direction you drive your civilization at that point to, try and be successful. So the Romans will get their legions. The Romans will have Julius Caesar. It's not relying on him appearing in the market and you luckily grabbing him. So with that, we can, firmly set the background of each civilization. So if you have any interest in the history at all, I like to think that, how can you describe Egypt in 23 cards? It's impossible. But at least if you were to sit down and on the back of a Post-it, write down, the highlights you might think of ancient Egypt, I'd like to think that at least some of them are in this game. So that's what I'd say, is if you like experiencing that kind of thing and you really like asymmetry, because each civilization is very, very different, the way they play. And in Legends, it goes off the scale, really, because with David on board, that's the point where we really, really push the envelope of, what was possible. Yeah.
People picked this up and then people really, really liked it. I mean, all of a sudden I'm getting people releasing videos on it. People are writing reviews. There's a lot of positive buzz about it. Every time I go on to, and I don't frequent Board Game Geek on a regular basis, but every time I've gone in the last month or something, it's been featured very, very prominently in some place on the site. How did you feel when you were seeing the kind of the positive kind of reception that it got, Nigel, after, the kind of the journey that you've been on with regards to your design in your games?
Well, there was certainly moments where I'd kind of pinch myself and think I'm going to wake up in a minute. So there was certainly some elements of that. But also I think because I've, been around the block quite a lot, I'm not expecting absolutely everybody to love this game. There's going to be some people that it just won't work for them. They won't like the downtime. It's too long. It's too much reading. I don't want to play this nation 2 or 3 times before I know what I'm doing. I'm super competitive. I want to win straight away. Those kind of people will not like it, because you get a new nation and you pick it up, your chances are you're going to crash and burn the first time you play, because it's not the same as the one you played before. So I'm fully expecting not everybody's going to love the game, and that's fine. What I'd rather is they knew that before they bought it. I think it's horrible when someone gets tricked into buying a game thinking it's one thing and then discovers it's something else, and they've spent their money on it. So I'd much rather the reviews were honest and not just a hype machine and said, this is what I like about it, this is what I don't. Or even if someone says, I didn't like it at all. But if they can, explain why they didn't like it. I mean, that's what I do on Board Game Geek when I read reviews or whatever, playthroughs. Sometimes the negative ones are more helpful than the gushing positive ones. Because sometimes people say, I didn't like it because of this and this and this. And I go, but I really like games that do that and that and that. So actually, I might actually check this out. The fact you didn't like it doesn't mean I'm not going to like it.
Yeah.
So, I'd much rather, and I'm quite pleased that, with the people that are tending to cover it, are, explaining what they like and showing the game. And it seems the playthroughs are not all just the same 2 nations. Not everyone's just picking, Rome and Carthage. And all you're seeing is that the whole time, because, hey, that's a typical historical matchup. People are picking different nations. So, you can see whether, the asymmetry is something you'd really like or not. So yeah, it's good.
So
I'm pleased that people are seeing it and thinking about it. Really, that's great.
Because you've also got the Imperium Legends as well.
Yes.
And it's very rare for you to see kind of like a base game come out and then almost immediately there's like an set of expansions alongside it.
Yeah, well,
Legends is not an expansion, and it came out literally at the same time. They are two independent base games.
Yeah, I know. I kind of know that. But what I'm saying is that it's kind of like, it's very unusual for usually a gap, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Usually there's like a base game and then there's like a secondary game, but that's usually 6 months to a year down the line to say, well, if you like this one, you're really going to love the Legend side of things.
It's because when we went to Osprey, we had so many civilizations at that point. The Osprey were going like, yeah, well, this isn't going to fit our footprint of where we see the game. You know, they didn't want to release a €60 big box with, 14 nations in it or whatever. But equally, they didn't want to just release one and then, have individual packs that you may or may not buy later. I mean, I guess they've done it a bit with some of their product line, but quite a lot of Osprey stuff, here's the game. So they were quite keen. So there was quite a lot of back and forth about what they do. And then they hit on the idea of 2 simultaneous games, both standalone but combinable. And, which one you pick is a good question. I think if you're new to the genre, then Classics is definitely a little bit more straightforward. But if you're a fairly experienced gamer, or you think you're quite quick at picking things up, either one is fine. And I just pick the one that's got the civilizations that interest you. So,
and if you're the kind of solo gamer that wants to sit at home with a very hard puzzle and figure it out eventually and get better at it, then actually Legends might even be better for you. So it's not like everyone should buy this except those few, because we honestly believe that there is a right answer for everyone. And plus, the other thing I wanted to quickly drop in before you are get the word back from me, is that the main selling point of the game, besides the theme and the art and the smart stuff, is the asymmetry. And yeah, sure, if you only had the 8 nations in Classics to look at, you would already go, oh, it's pretty cool that how different Romans are from the Carthaginians. But the fact that that we know how to do the Olmecs and the Arthurians and the Utopians for and the Vikings from Classics, on the other hand, that makes you go, oh my god, how much things can this system truly do? And that was what made me excited, because I want to do 17 different more things with this system if they let me.
Yeah. So, well, that's what I was going to say. Is it sounds to me like this could be, because you mentioned, Nigel, you mentioned Dominion. Now, one of the things Dominion is famous for is that you can literally potentially fill a Kallax with all of the Dominion expansions. So are you guys already saying, well, in this case, is it easy to say, well, we could have all of these things, or do you also need to be, well, why don't we just have consider another maybe X number of decks, and then we leave it as a system and that's it. And then everybody can play it. They've got tons of replayability there, different configurations of the different factions that they can deal with.
Well, some of it depends on Osprey, and if they're interested in doing more, and if they are, well, we wouldn't say no. The thing is, given my consideration with the theme, whatever we come up with, there needs to be some time, or rope in some people that know, if I don't, the thematic background. So if you say, hey, we want to cover, ancient Japan, because you haven't done that, I'm going to go, well, I don't know much about ancient Japan, and I don't want to just go to Wikipedia and hope that someone hasn't put something in as a joke. I won't mention a game about ancient Japan when that happened. So I kind of Come
on, you can't do that, Nigel.
I'd either need some time to, go away and hit the books and find out myself, or we'd need to, get some other collaborators who do know about to say these are the key points. This is what this is what made this ancient civilization tick. This was and then we can try and use find the mechanics that fit that. So yes, the potential's there, but I mean I'm not making any promises, that's for sure.
And on the other hand, even if we have all the knowledge and Osprey wants 17 different expansions for this game, we wouldn't just make 17 Dominion expansion boxes for this game, because Nigel had another genius idea on the theme that I assumed he would say, but hey, he left it for me, so win. Is that the history mechanism, the nation deck and the development and the history, it represents a very high zoom out of actual time. So the nations that are quick to become an empire and quick to face the development puzzle are the nations that got big 2,000-3,000 BC. And the nations that have a giant nation deck and thus random access to cards, and their difficulty is how to manage through that, are the ones that peaked between 400 to 1000 AD, which means and Vikings, the nation that doesn't have any development decks, therefore they become an empire for a second at the end of the game, or rather don't, have peaked in 1066, the week before the Normans conquered England, which means that if tomorrow we pulled out a fantastically exciting civilization that became the strong power of its region in 1214, I would feel bad about putting it in the game. Which is why the most obvious question is, when can we play the British Empire and the steampunk airships? And the answer is, we can do that in an Imperium style game, but we would never put that in Imperium.
In Imperium itself, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It has to be set in that history has just started, but the memory of the ancient civilizations is still alive era, because once you hit Middle Ages, then it's a different world.
Yeah, there's definitely a timeline in there. Obviously, the fantastical nations are a little bit, but they are still there, because that's why we've got the Atlanteans, because, hey, the ancient Greeks wrote about them, so they're an empire before even Egypt was an empire. And King Arthur, well, he was around, before the Vikings invaded England, because he was, probably a Romano Brit, although we've gone back to the Welsh legends for that. So, we've definitely been conscious of a timeline, and whatever we do, if it's going to be in Imperium, it needs to still sit on that timeline, unless it's something, similar engine, but, not that you'd necessarily put them together, or if you did, it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah. And you don't just want to fall into the void of throwing out content after content when something does become successful.
No, it's got to bring some reason for it. Exactly.
Yeah. And speaking of falling into the void.
Yes. I just wanted to plug our very helpful publisher here, because the reason that we're confident that this can work is because Osprey has already shown the way with the Undaunted series, which got, it was always great, but nobody knew how successful it would be, and they stayed true to it. They plan on making cool stuff for it, but they are still not degrading it into, hey, buy a booster pack to your nation and send it to the moon kind of things. So we're confident that we can stay true to Nigel's original vision here.
That's good. No, that is what you want. But speaking of falling into the void, oh my days. You're working on another game to get... See, you ruined it, David. I'm just saying. But I'm not saying you ruined it. But coming soon, there's a game called Voidfall, which I believe is going to be your... another collaboration between the two of you. Am I correct?
Certainly is. I think I'll leave David to say what he's going to say, because
right.
I run the risk of either not saying enough or saying too much.
So the backstory behind Voidfall is that once Nigel and I got cracking with Imperium, I remembered, hey, didn't I love Omega Centauri many eons ago, and shouldn't we now have the capabilities and the skills to do something like that, but not mess up the player aids and the rulebook? And on one sunny day, driving home from UK Game Expo and talking to Victor Peter, the head of Mindclash Games and the designer of Tricarion and Cerebria, and like half the things I know about game development I learned from him. And I was like, hey, what do you think about one day making a space 4X game together? It's like, that could be interesting. I don't know how we would do it because, we don't want to do a Twilight Imperium, but what would you do?
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know, but how about you play Omega Centauri? He was like, play what? Never heard of it. So I got him a copy. Or asked Nigel to get him a copy. I don't remember the details. Then I taught them the game over Skype to make sure that they don't get the rules wrong. And Victor came back. I see what you mean. What's your plan? You wouldn't ask this of me if you didn't have a plan. I said, yeah, sure. And that's when I introduced Nigel to Mindclash. And while initially we were talking about, hey, can we just, tighten up, polish it, make it cooler, and just make a sequel to Omega Centauri, but then the Mindclash need to take something good and turn it into something unexpectedly, differently special, amazing, kicked in. And I remember one conversation, and if you played Omega Centauri, this will be an obvious moment when the Mindclash team played the game and they said, yeah, but can we remove the cubes? Now, for anyone who played Omega Centauri would know that the whole point of the game is collecting cubes. And what they meant was, can we do something more thematic and more integrated? But once you pull that thread, we were like, so we weren't improving Omega Centauri, we were learning from it and making a new game in the same elevator pitch. And Nigel, to me, today is solidified as, I don't want to say to his face, my favorite co-design partner, because he took it in his stride. We literally just removed 99% of his stuff, but then he put it back better. Yeah. So it's yes, we acknowledge that it has the similar roots of Omega Centauri, deterministic combat, non-random technologies, known actions to be picked from, etc. But it's a completely different game. And obviously Mindclash always has these tiny little ambitions of pleasing everyone. So, I mean, anyone who's willing to look at those ginormous games that I think are well worth the effort. So now it's going to be 1 to 4 player, competitive, co-op, various maps, technology setups, all customizable. We'll have suggestions for people that want to be holding a gun to each other's heads all day long. And we'll have and we are trying to make sure that the game would be fun if we were literally playing on different maps. We're not actually going to play on different maps, but we are like, that's our goal, that even that would be fun. So and then again, the same thing all over again in co-op. And that is, and the fact that Nigel didn't run away screaming from me 2.5 years ago when I first asked, Victor, love the game, but can we change like everything? and these days he's more than along for the ride. And when I go overboard, last week he was joking in the team meeting that, oh, I was being Victor and I told David not to do that, and he was completely right. So it's been the craziest, most satisfying project, and also it's terrible for my health because now every other project I want to work on, I want to do it as perfectly as Voidfall, and that's really, really hard.
Because the thing about Mindclash is it's not just the mechanics and the massive big box of stuff and the table presence. They build worlds. They put an awful lot of effort into the backstory that goes along with it and making sure that the art fits with it. And okay, you can play the game and ignore some of that, but if you get right into it, like anachrony. You know, you can go read about the different paths and why the each faction does what it does, and it all makes sense thematically, which just meshes with how I do things. So yeah, it's been brilliant.
All right, it was nice knowing you, Richard. Bye. I need food anyway. He's been eaten by a wizard, but it wasn't us because we are not wizards. Ta-da!
I dropped out for a second, so
it's fine. We were very entertaining.
That sounds funny.
In fact, we probably signed off extremely well for you. So
no, that's fine. That's fine. No. Oh, you have to go. Okay.
Yes.
So let's wrap up. Then.
And also, Nigel just dropped off, so I don't know what happened.
Oh, yes. Nigel probably thought you'd right. Okay, well, hopefully
no.
Nigel.
We literally said that we're gonna waiting for you, but there he is.
Oh, he's back.
Anyway,
he's back.
As I said, I need to go, and we did a very cool sign off for you, so you can use it.
I will check the recording. But if David, if you want to disappear, thank you very, very much for joining us. I'll keep Nigel on for like 2 minutes more if that's okay.
That's absolutely fine. I'm sure you, with your editing skills, you can make this sound like it wasn't a.
I have amazing editing skills. I've actually made David sound like a quiet mouse sometimes.
Okay, that's it. I'm quitting. That's bye.
Bye then.
Anyway, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
David.
you very much for having me here today.
You.
And I would say you're welcome to call me anytime, but no.
That's not true. Let's not.
All right.
We are gentlemen. Let's not lie to each other. But thanks again.
David will want to talk to you for his next Kickstarter, I promise you.
He will do, but he's and he's away. But okay, that's good. We can do we should do an entire new session and just kind of edit it and just have him not in it at all. But no, I mean, so you're now in the position where you've got, obviously you're talking about Voidfall. What's happening with Voidfall? When is that going to be? Kind of what's the situation with that? When is that coming to Kickstarter? Is that going to directly into kind of distribution? What's the situation with that?
No, the Mindclash, their current business model is they do Kickstarter. So that's what they're working towards now. I haven't got one thing about Mindclash is they definitely, they try to do things, when they're ready and when things are ready. I mean, sometimes with any project with as many moving parts as a Mindclash game, there's delays, but they don't go into it with no idea and then discover, oh yeah, we haven't done that yet. Oh, that's another 6 month delay on top of that. So that they try and make sure they've got, that there is a game that actually is playable, that's been tested, that's we tried this out, etc. before they launch. So yes, we're quite hard at work at working on it, working with Ian O'Toole, because that's the other thing. When you bring an artist and graphic designer into it as well, sometimes you either conceive of a gameplay mechanic and Ian will go, well, how are you going to do that on the table? Or the other way round, it might be, well, he can, sometimes he inputs with if you did it like this, or because he's obviously working on the iconography as well, that inputs and gives ideas as well. So we're still it's still a work in progress, but each iteration is closer and closer to what Mindclash is view as good enough for them. So the plan is to come to Kickstarter sometime this year. They'll do it when they're ready.
And how are you, in retrospect? I mean, obviously, as we kind of alluded before, you've kind of come over several kind of bumps now. Has what's happened with Imperium and now what's happening with Voidfall, is that kind of really tempered up your enthusiasm? Is it kind of, are you now like a flood of more ideas? Now that obviously you've got a name out there, you've got a game out there which people are aware of. You're going to have obviously Voidfall and everything that happens with that. So,
yeah, I don't think the flood of ideas is necessarily more of a stream than it was before. It might be the ideas might be a little bit more focused and not quite so scattergun. The other thing, of course, is I'm spending a lot more time working on games rather than playing them or doing other things. And the other thing I think is when you start doing a lot of game development and design and looking at mechanisms and, I'm picking something up that was sort of working apart and putting it back together again. It's a bit like, you're not going to do major surgery on your car as you're driving down the motorway. So, there's times where you have to kind of put the game to, and, work on it because its bits are not working, or even throw bits of it away and come back to it. Now I've been doing that much more. I'm not going to say it's spoilt playing games for me, but quite often I'll play a new game and I catch myself looking at the mechanisms, which is not how I used to play games at all. Because as I said before, it's all about the narrative and the experience. And I kind of have to catch myself sometimes to say, look, stop thinking about that, just play the game.
Stop thinking about it and just enjoy what you're doing instead. Yeah. Okay.
So I sometimes have to pull myself up about that a bit. But no, it's great. I'm really enjoying it. And I'm glad people like what I'm doing, so that helps as well.
So in terms of, if people have listened along tonight and they are, they're wanting to kind of keep an eye on you, everybody knows where David is. You can't escape from the guy. But if they're interested in following, I have so much time for him. I mean, I know it's like there's a bit of back and forward, but there's nothing malicious about it. He's like, he was involved in an Anachrony. He's got the the Defense of Procyon 3 kind of coming. I mean, there's lots of games that he's been involved in. Like solo modes and stuff like that, just Blitzkrieg and everything like that, which I've kind of I've got a lot of respect for the amount of work and just what he's turning out again and again and again. So he's fine. But if people have listened along tonight and they're like, oh, I want to keep up with Mr. Buckle. I want to, find out, keep up to speed with what he's up to, what he's doing and where we can find them. Where do you exist on the internet webs, Mr. Buckle?
Oh yeah, I'm on. You might, I've got Twitter, I've got Facebook, but Board Game Geek is where I'm most active, I think.
All right, okay.
Saying that, I don't envisage turning into David Mark II and be producing 4 games on Kickstarter at the same time and flipping my brain between 3 projects all in the same day. I'm much more of a bit more methodical, work on stuff kind of guy. So I think at the moment you'll probably see my name pop up with David. I think there's quite a lot. We work quite well together. Yeah. And so, I think we'll see. But at the moment, with irons in the fire and whatever, I think it'll be mostly with David that I'll be doing stuff, unless something else.
Well, you never know.
Comes up. Never say never about anything, really. But yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, I am not a full-time designer. That wouldn't pay the mortgage.
Not in this country, anyway.
No,
we wouldn't pay rent as well, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, quite. Absolutely.
Look, I can only thank you for spending the time kind of coming on. I know it was a baptism of fire because I've obviously spoke to David before. I haven't spoken to yourself before. So I can only thank you for giving me the time this evening to have a chat. I really appreciate your time, and hopefully everybody who's listening along tonight will understand a little bit more about you and the kind of the person behind kind of Imperium, and giving them a better understanding about the the game itself. So I really do appreciate your time this evening, Nigel.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity as well. As I say, it's, I'm a little bit like a fish out of water. And what I would say is I'm not so much into this kind of whole personality kind of thing. So I just say, try the game. And if you like it, that's great. And if you're not sure, go check some playthroughs first and see whether it is a sort of game you might like. Yeah.
It's all right. I get told I've not got a personality at all. So I guess... I don't know why that is. It's just abject cruelty out there. If you've listened along tonight and if you want to keep an eye on what we're up to on the internet webs, then just search for us. We're Not Wizards. You'll find us on various places of various online spaces. Like you can find us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and we are on TikTok because we're sad, but we're not 12. And YouTube and all these other just everywhere. We're like some kind of horrific... I was going to say we're like some kind of horrific plague that has to be stopped. But that's a bit too close to home. But if you like what you've listened to, please jump onto Apple Podcasts and give us a rating or a review. And if you are going to be giving us a rating or a review, don't give us 1 star, because it'll make me cry. But at the same time, don't give us 10 stars because it makes me big-headed and we don't need that in the world. Give us something in the middle, like a 5, because it's average. And at the end of the day, we are just a little bit average. But one of the people who's not been average tonight is rather wonderful, rather fantastic, decided to stay into the end and didn't jump out like David did. I give you Mr. Nigel Buckle. Thank you very, very much for coming on, sir.
Thank you.
And there is only 2 more things to do. The first thing is to remember that we're many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Nigel?
I think we both create a little bit of magic.
Oh, you flatter me. The second thing is to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from Nigel. Say goodbye, Nigel.
Goodbye.
And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe, roll 6s, make something awful. And until the next time, if you fancy yourself a little bit of deck building, a little bit of resource management, a little bit of learning about history, then get yourself a copy of Imperium. But until the next time, goodbye.
Goodbye.
A wizard is never late. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.